This is Johnny Vedmore on today's News Talk TNT.
Yeah, and Alexis J, wonderful. Unfortunately, I believe there were three other heads of the independent inquiry, or at least chosen people to take on that inquiry, who were all people like Butler Schloss, who all had weird connections with people who had very serious accusations. So I remember covering that very carefully. Now, some of my questions are going to be from a personal aspect, and I hope it's hard to talk about these things often, but I was groomed for over a 2-year period by a paedophile who managed to intrude into almost every part of my life. What do you say to parents to make them understand how to keep their children safe from these sort of predators?
So may I just say, was this in your school, or was this a friend of the family?
He was a member of the SEAL Knot. My dad was a commanding officer of a 17th century reenactment society. He befriended my father, became extremely useful to my father, created loads of equipment and other stuff, and became suddenly he was sitting in my living room saying the worst things to me, and I was all alone.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, and I'm sorry if that's me coming on has triggered you in any way, because we never know, do we, what's going to suddenly set us on a rabbit run. But the thing is, parents don't expect it to be in plain sight. It is in plain sight. I don't know if you were sat on this guy's lap. Lap sitting is a massive sign, and if it's a man, it's how that child is put on their lap. Normally a man would put a child across their lap, certainly wouldn't even encourage a child to come on their lap, and these people will put the child's bottom right on the fly zip for all the obvious reasons. So the child's back is against your front. If it all I can say is, if you feel creepy, if you get that feeling, you draw a line under it, because that feeling, that is your solar plexus, that is your instinct, that is the gut feeling that you get, that is your second brain, that is your alarm bell. When it's going that quirky feeling, it's telling you, whoa, beware, stop, watch. What is it you see? What is it? Don't try and logic it. And that's what I did. I saw, if I'm really honest, back 24 years ago, I saw things that I hadn't. I mean, he used to wrestle. I don't know if your guy, he would put my boys on the floor and he'd be astride them, wrestling with them, like toy play wrestling, like, oh, they love to be, have this sort of rumpus going on. But there is a sexual electricity there. It's not just like larking around with a child that's been on Spider-Man, and you will know this. There's a real intense, and the police will always say, beware of lap sitting, beware of tickling games. And I have seen that. And if you remember the case of Barry Bennell, the footballer involved with the Premier League, do you remember several years ago when those lads came out? Exactly the same behavior. It's and they are very often charismatic. They are in positions of, or if they're not in a position of it, they will assume authority. So they become a person that you don't really want to question. We've all worked with those people, haven't you? Because they're very quick to give you an answer. If you challenge them, they're very quick to come back at you and blame it on you. So there were things of which I'm not ashamed, because I didn't know what was happening to me, but I certainly would rather not have gift wrapped my children to a paedophile for 4 years of their lives. And I mean, it is, and they will go, they're not going to target the child really first. They're going to make sure that they're all hunky-dory with the parents, and if you've got a child who is seeking to do something that is an achievement, maybe it's in the arts, maybe it's music, maybe it's dance, any of those sort of career choices, you're going to be even more at risk. Because if it's tennis, if it's football, if it's, those extra lessons where you have to be with the tutor on your own, honestly, parents, even if it's private music lessons, stay outside the room, stay in the room. I used to be a music teacher, and I always let parents sit in the room. Why wouldn't I? I've got nothing to hide. And actually it's helping, because the parent can see what you're trying to get the child to do. I would be incredibly cautious of somebody that doesn't want you around. and gets very iffy if you question them, because they will come back at you, and you suddenly find yourself at the wrong end of the shark because they're pushing back on you, and they will get verbally aggressive and blame you.
I would normally go to a break right now, but I'm going to skip the break out because I think this is a really important conversation. I think it's a really important conversation to have. I have to say that to an extent, I was lucky because my parents allowed me to watch 18 movies from a very young age. We used to go to the video shop and get things out. So when he started saying the things to me, he made it very crystal clear what he wanted to do to me. And I knew that this was bad. I knew from the off it was bad. So I never let myself be in a position where I would be sitting on his lap or I would be coming too close. He would try and always continue to tell me, though, listen, if what we talked about, if you ever want to do it, if you ever wanted, and he was looking for that opportunity. Now, from my own experiences, I have extremely serious trust issues when it comes to dealing with the police and social services. So how do you think these public institutions are currently failing to protect children?
They're failing massively because there's a great gap. There's no flow of communication. You know, the police, and it is such a lottery which police officer you get. If a child, and I say this to parents listening, if your child tells you under the age of 7 that someone has touched them, believe it, because they have. And you can't make that up, because a child's brain is not developed to be able to make that fantasy world up. They have either seen it or they've had it done to them. And this is what my irritant is with the police, that sometimes I will advocate for people and I'll open that door with the police, and they might say, like, well, you know, the child's 4 years old. I said, exactly, that is your evidence, because they physically, mentally, their brain has not developed to make that sort of fantasy world. So you've got to take it as a given. Another sign would be, because once I've gone into prisons and I've talked to these people and I've said to every single one of them, tell me about, because no one's born to be an abuser. No one is born to be an abuser. Tell me about your early 3 years of your life or 4 years of your life. Every time that abuser, without fail, and I've met lots, every time they say their childhood was rubbish. And very often the mother, very interesting, mothers that don't validate their sons as, you know, masculinity, you know, that put them down and push them around, are overly controlling. I've not yet met one who wasn't cruel to animals and insects. And I don't mean, you know, just putting a bumblebee in a jar. I mean pulling their wings off. I don't mean just swinging a cat round. I mean you're cutting the tail off, you know. I mean, and I have seen some extraordinary tales. Even if you're at playgroup and a child is ripping off the head of a little pony, My Little Pony, you know, those plastic figures, that is not right. I'm not saying normal, because what's normal? I'm not normal. You know, but it's what would be the expected behavior, and what is over that bandwidth, and that's what you're looking at. So every single one I have met, arson absolutely connects with sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, and primarily boys, and that's because there's an anger. Boys find it difficult, as you will know, to tell you and to talk about it, and there's an anger that you've been duped. One of my boys for years thought he was gay because I said, it's not that you were allowed it to happen, you were a little boy and you were duped into it, you were talked into it. And I've studied a lot about paedophilia, and there are several different types, and their engine room is their brain, and some are aggressive, some go straight in for the hard hit, yeah. Others are into almost a romance. They will schmooze and cajole, and that's the one that my boys had. Thought he was in love with them, gave them lots of presents, was very gentle. And then you've got the very autocratic one. There's several different types, but their engine room is in the brain. You cannot switch the brain off, and that's why castration doesn't work. It can't reliably work, because what you're going to do, take the brain out. You know, and every time it's a risk. If you have done, I don't believe this sort of low offending. If you have touched a child, you know, if you have touched one, it's one too many. You are a risk. You are a risk. And I feel passionate about this, that people are too too soft on this, and we are too soft in this country generally. We are not looking after kids in this country as we should. We are not doing it, or we would have mandatory reporting.
This is Johnny Vedmore on today's News Talk TNT.